I never thought I'd see my uncle that way, vulnerable, exposed, and completely unguarded. But when I stepped into his room that night, everything changed. The way his eyes locked onto mine, the tension in the air, I couldn't look away. My heart raced, and in that moment, I knew we had crossed a line we could never uncross. What happened next left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. I never planned to end up living with my uncle, Nathan. It was supposed to be temporary, a few months while I finished college and my mom traveled for work. Nathan had always been the fun, easygoing uncle. He taught me how to ride a bike when I was a kid, helped me fix my first car, and always made me feel safe. When I moved into his house, I thought it would just be a peaceful place to focus on my studies. Nathan lived in the countryside with his wife, Victoria. She was older than him, elegant and polished, but there was always something distant about her. At first, it felt awkward, like I was intruding on their space. But over time, things settled. Victoria gave me advice on cooking and cleaning, and Nathan made sure I had everything I needed. They seemed happy, comfortable, if not overly affectionate with each other. I told myself their quiet marriage was just the result of years of routine. Then I started noticing the little things. Nathan would linger when we talked, his eyes holding mine just a second too long. He'd find reasons to touch my shoulder or brush against me as he passed by. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that it was just my mind playing tricks. But as the weeks passed, the tension grew. It wasn't just Nathan. It was me too. I found myself watching him more closely, studying the way his hands moved as he fixed things around the house, or how his eyes softened when he smiled at me. I hated myself for noticing, for feeling the way I did. I told myself it was nothing, just a silly crush brought on by loneliness and stress. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the pull between us felt impossible to resist. Then came the night that changed everything. The night I walked into his room and saw him lying there, vulnerable and unguarded. I should have turned around, but I didn't. And that was the moment everything started to unravel. The days after that night felt different, charged with an energy I couldn't ignore. Nathan and I didn't talk about it. We acted like nothing had happened, but the air between us had shifted. Every glance, every accidental touch felt heavier, more deliberate. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. He was my uncle, someone I had trusted my whole life. But the way his eyes lingered on me told me I wasn't imagining it. One evening, while Victoria was out with friends, I stayed in my room, pretending to study. But I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting back to him, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me, the warmth of his touch when he'd brushed past me earlier that day. I told myself to stop, but the thoughts wouldn't go away. Then I heard footsteps outside my door. My heart raced as I turned to see Nathan standing there. "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "I just wanted to check on you. You've been quiet today." I forced a smile. "Just busy with homework." He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room before landing back on me. "You sure everything's okay?" "Yeah," I lied, but my voice wavered. He sat down on the edge of my bed, and suddenly the space between us felt too small. "You know you can talk to me, right?" he said softly. I nodded, but my body betrayed me. My hands trembled as I fiddled with the corner of my notebook. Nathan reached out, his hand brushing against mine. The touch was brief, but it sent a jolt through me. I pulled back quickly, but he didn't move. Instead, his eyes held mine, and for a moment neither of us said a word. Then he cleared his throat and stood up. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said, his voice tight. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that he hadn't done anything wrong, but the words caught in my throat. After he left, I sat there for what felt like hours, my thoughts spinning. I hated how much I craved his attention, how much I wanted him to come back. The tension between us only grew in the days that followed. We found excuses to be near each other, lingering in the kitchen after dinner, brushing past each other in the hallway. Each touch felt deliberate, yet neither of us acknowledged it. Then one afternoon it all came to a head. I was in the laundry room folding clothes when Nathan walked in. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice low. "No, I haven't," I replied, avoiding his eyes. "You have." He stepped closer, and my breath caught. "Nathan." He cut me off. "Just tell me if you feel it too." I opened my mouth to deny it, but I couldn't. Instead, I looked up at him, and in that moment, everything changed. He reached out, his fingers brushing against my cheek. "We shouldn't," I whispered, but I didn't move away. And neither did he. I hated how much I wanted him, how much I needed him, but I couldn't stop it. And as he leaned in closer, I knew there was no turning back. The moment his hand touched my cheek, everything else faded. I should have pulled away. I should have stopped it right then and there. But instead, I leaned into his touch, craving the warmth and comfort he offered. "Nathan, we can't," I whispered, but my voice was weak, trembling. "Then tell me to stop," he said, his eyes locked on mine. I couldn't. Instead, I let him step closer. His fingers traced along my jaw, and my breath hitched. My heart raced as the tension between us thickened, and before I could think, his lips were on mine. It started softly, tentative, almost unsure. But then the dam broke. I melted into him, my hands clutching at his shirt as he pulled me closer. It felt dangerous, forbidden, but also exhilarating. When we finally broke apart, my breathing was ragged, and my thoughts were a mess. "This is wrong," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Then why does it feel so right?" he whispered, his thumb brushing against my lips. I didn't have an answer. Over the next few days, the tension between us escalated. We found excuses to be alone, late-night conversations in the kitchen, brushing against each other in the hallway, lingering in doorways just a moment too long. Each moment made it harder to resist, harder to pretend that nothing was happening. And then it happened again. Victoria was away visiting her sister, leaving us alone in the house. I told myself I would keep my distance, but the second he walked into the living room and sat down beside me, I knew I was lying to myself. We sat in silence, the tension building until I couldn't take it anymore. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, his voice low and raw. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. "Nathan, this isn't—" "I know," he interrupted. "But I don't care." And then he kissed me again, and this time there was no hesitation. His hands moved down my arms, pulling me closer, and my body responded before my mind could stop it. It felt like a wildfire, hot, uncontrollable, and consuming everything in its path. We stumbled to his room, and as the door closed behind us, I knew we had crossed a line we could never uncross. Afterward, I lay in his arms, my heart still pounding, my mind racing with guilt and desire. "We shouldn't have done that," I whispered, but even as I said it, I didn't pull away. He kissed my forehead. "I don't regret it," he said. "But I did. At least, part of me did." The guilt hit me hardest the next morning when Victoria called. Nathan answered the phone while I stood in the kitchen, pretending to make coffee. He was calm, casual, as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my stomach. What if she found out? What if someone else saw us? The more I thought about it, the more the panic set in. I started avoiding him, trying to put distance between us, but it was impossible. Every time I looked at him, I felt the pull all over again. And he didn't make it any easier. He cornered me in the hallway one afternoon, his eyes dark with frustration. "Why are you pulling away?" he demanded. "Because this is wrong," I snapped. "Then tell me you don't want this," he challenged. I opened my mouth to say it, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I let him pull me into his arms again, and for a moment I forgot about the consequences. But the guilt always came back, stronger, heavier, reminding me that this couldn't last. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. And deep down, I wasn't sure I was ready for what would happen when it did. It happened sooner than I expected. The weight of what Nathan and I had done was already suffocating, but we convinced ourselves we could keep it hidden. We were careful, secretive glances, stolen touches when no one was around, but secrets like ours always find a way to surface. Victoria came home earlier than planned. I was in Nathan's room when I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My heart stopped. "Nathan!" I hissed, scrambling out of bed and pulling on my clothes. "She's home." Panic flashed in his eyes, but he recovered quickly. "Go out the back door," he said, shoving my shoes toward me. I did as he said, slipping out of the room just as the front door opened. I ran through the backyard, my pulse racing, my breath ragged. But the damage had already been done. I didn't realize it until later that night when Victoria knocked on my bedroom door. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice calm, too calm. I nodded, my stomach twisting. She sat down on the edge of my bed, her eyes scanning the room before finally settling on mine. "I need you to be honest with me," she said softly. I swallowed hard. "About what?" "About you and Nathan." My blood ran cold. "What about us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Victoria sighed, her expression hardening. "I'm not stupid, Lily. I've seen the way you look at him. And the way he looks at you." I opened my mouth to deny it, but she didn't give me the chance. "I found your sweater in his room," she said, her voice breaking. "Explain that." Tears filled my eyes. "Victoria, Don't," she snapped, standing up. "Don't lie to me." I broke down then, sobbing. "I'm sorry," I whispered. It just happened. Her face crumbled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry too. But then her expression hardened. How could you, she said, her voice shaking. I trusted you. I let you live in my house. I didn't mean for this to happen, I pleaded, but my words felt hollow even to me. She stepped back, her eyes filled with disgust. Get out. Wait, please, I begged, reaching for her. Get out of my house, Lily. I froze, my heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. I packed my bags in silence, my hands trembling as I shoved clothes into a suitcase. Nathan tried to talk to me, but I wouldn't let him. This is over, I said, my voice cold and final. Don't do this, he pleaded. We can fix this. No, we can't, I said, stepping past him. Victoria didn't look at me when I walked out the door. I drove away that night with tears streaming down my face, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I lost them both, Nathan and Victoria. And worse, I lost myself. The days that followed were a blur. I stayed with a friend, but no matter how much distance I put between myself and what had happened, I couldn't escape the guilt. Nathan kept calling, but I didn't answer. I knew I couldn't go back, not after the damage we'd caused. One night, I finally listened to one of his voicemails. I still love you, he said, his voice breaking. I can't stop thinking about you. Please call me. I cried myself to sleep that night, but I didn't call him back. Instead, I started therapy, hoping to make sense of what had happened. How I had let myself get swept up in something so dangerous, so destructive. I realized it wasn't love. It was loneliness, desire, and the thrill of crossing a forbidden line. Nathan had filled a void I didn't even realize I had, but it came at a cost I wasn't prepared to pay. I destroyed a marriage. I shattered trust. And I lost the one person who had always made me feel safe. I still think about him sometimes, wonder if he stayed with Victoria or if their marriage fell apart after I left. But I know it doesn't matter. What matters is what I've learned. Love isn't supposed to feel like a secret you have to hide. It isn't supposed to leave you drowning in guilt or regret. Real love doesn't destroy, it builds. And what Nathan and I had wasn't love. It was an escape. A mistake. One that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Leaving Nathan's house felt like tearing myself away from a part of me I didn't want to let go, but knew I had to. The first night in my friend's spare room was unbearable. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything. Every touch, every stolen moment, every whispered promise, and hated myself for missing it. I didn't just lose Nathan. I lost Victoria too. She had been more than just my uncle's wife, she was family. And now, I'd become the reason her world fell apart. I spent the first few days in denial, convincing myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. Maybe Nathan and Victoria could work things out. Maybe Nathan would call and tell me he'd left her. Maybe I'd wake up and find out none of it had happened. But it had. And no amount of wishing could undo the damage. Nathan called me repeatedly, but I ignored every message. I couldn't face him. Not after the look in Victoria's eyes when she threw me out. Eventually, he stopped trying. That should have made it easier, but it didn't. The silence was worse. I kept expecting closure, an apology, an explanation, something to make it feel less unfinished. But instead, I was left alone with my thoughts, drowning in guilt and regret. The rumors started not long after. Victoria hadn't told anyone the full story, but she didn't have to. People knew something had happened, and my sudden disappearance from their lives only fueled the gossip. I overheard a neighbor whispering at the grocery store, saying, "It's always the quiet ones." I left without buying anything. The shame felt unbearable. I stayed off social media, avoided old friends, and even stopped answering my mom's calls. I couldn't bear to face anyone who might ask what happened. But no matter how much I tried to hide, the guilt followed me. I started therapy a few weeks later. It took time to admit the truth, to say the words out loud. I had an affair with my uncle. My therapist didn't flinch. She didn't judge me. Instead, she asked the questions I had been too afraid to ask myself. Why did I let it happen? What was I looking for? Was it really about Nathan, or was it about me? The answers were complicated. Nathan made me feel wanted, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I mistook that feeling for love, when in reality, it was nothing more than a dangerous escape from my own emptiness. I hadn't been in love with him. I had been in love with the way he made me feel. Realizing that didn't make the guilt disappear, but it gave me clarity. I finally saw the relationship for what it was, a mistake. One I'd spend the rest of my life learning from. Months later, I heard through a mutual friend that Victoria had filed for divorce. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to reach out, to apologize, to beg her to forgive me. but I knew it wouldn't change anything. Some wounds can't be healed with words. As for Nathan, I don't know where he is now. I haven't seen or heard from him since the night I left. And maybe that's for the best. I've learned the hard way that some lines can't be uncrossed, no matter how much you wish they could. Now I'm focusing on rebuilding, piece by piece. It hasn't been easy, but I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. I've made peace with the fact that I can't change the past. What I can do is make sure I never repeat it. Because real love, the kind that lasts, doesn't come from secrets and shame. It comes from honesty, trust, and knowing when to walk away from something that was never meant to be. And this was never meant to be. Time doesn't erase mistakes, but it dulls the sting. The weeks turned into months, and I slowly started piecing my life back together. The guilt lingered, like a shadow I couldn't quite escape, but therapy helped me untangle the mess I had made. I learned that what happened with Nathan wasn't about love. It was about loneliness. I had mistaken attention and passion for something deeper, something meaningful. But real love doesn't leave you drowning in guilt and shame. It lifts you. And what we had, it only pulled me down. The hardest part wasn't letting go of Nathan. It was forgiving myself. I spent so long blaming him, blaming Victoria, blaming the circumstances. But in the end, the truth was simple. I made the choice. And choices have consequences. Victoria never forgave me. I didn't expect her to. I broke her trust, shattered her marriage, and walked away with scars that still haven't healed. I thought about reaching out to her so many times, to apologize again, to explain, but every time, I stopped myself. Because some wounds aren't meant to be reopened. Nathan faded from my life completely. I heard rumors about the divorce, about him moving to another state, but I didn't try to find out if they were true. I didn't need to. What we had wasn't love, and I know now that walking away from him was the best decision I could have made. But that doesn't mean it was easy. There were nights when I missed him, the way he made me feel wanted, seen, and alive. But I learned to sit with that feeling instead of running from it. I let it hurt, because the pain was a reminder, a warning of what happens when you let loneliness make decisions for you. I won't make that mistake again. I'm learning to find strength in myself instead of searching for it in someone else. I've built boundaries, repaired old friendships, and started trusting myself again. It's been slow, but it's progress. I still have bad days, days when the shame creeps back in, and I wonder if I'll ever really move past it. But then I remind myself of how far I've come. I'm not the woman who let her emotions cloud her judgment anymore. I'm stronger now, wiser. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love isn't supposed to feel like a secret you have to hide. Real love doesn't destroy. It doesn't leave you drowning in regret. It builds you up. It heals. It brings light instead of darkness. And that's what I'm holding out for. Not passion born from secrecy, but something real, something steady and safe. I can't undo what happened. I can't rewrite the past or erase the pain I caused. But I can move forward. I can learn. And I can promise myself that no matter how tempting something seems, I will never let loneliness lead me down that path again. Because mistakes don't define us. What defines us is how we rise after we fall. And I'm still rising. One step at a time. What would you have done in her situation? Could you resist the temptation, or would you fall into the same trap? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your opinions and experiences. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another emotional and thought-provoking story. Stay tuned. More shocking stories are coming your way soon.